Hi, this is Tim Anderson. I'm programming coordinator here at the 29th Annual Florida Film Festival, and welcome to the Filmmaker Forum Q&A session for Shorts Block number 4, sponsored by the Orlando Film Commission. Really super chance to have these filmmakers get together with us here on Zoom, and hopefully you guys got a chance to see all of their work in the festival yesterday or got a chance to take a look at it on our Eventive platform. So let me get right started with introducing our first filmmaker, and we'll take it from there. Rachel, could you say hi?
Hi, nice to meet everyone. I'm Rachel Harrison Gordon, and I'm the writer-director of Broken Bird. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Moira?
Hello, my name is Moira, and I am the writer and director of Practice.
Awesome. Jacob?
I'm Jacob. I'm the writer-director of Claire at 7 Months.
And Betsy and Dara, I guess you can go in succession.
Okay. I'm Betsy Kenney. I'm the co-writer and director of Tapes.
And I'm Dara Katz, and I'm the other co-writer and director of Tapes.
And that leaves Michael, not last, certainly not least.
Thank you. And I'm Mike Vukadinovich. I'm the writer-director of The Priest.
Awesome. So one of the things I want to do is we have a lot of film school students that come to these screenings, and a lot of film school students in Orlando. I'm presuming that any film schools are going back into session anymore. But one of the things that I think everybody always kind of generally wants to know a little bit is sort of the genesis of your project. You know, why? Obviously, everything takes time, everything takes money, and there's only so many hours in a day to make a movie. So I guess the question that always kind of comes up first and foremost is why you felt that this was the story you needed to tell, and you know how you got there. And we can actually go in the same order you guys introduced yourselves. So Rachel, I'll let you start.
Oh my gosh. Well, Broken Bird is autobiographical. It's my first film. I was not a filmmaker until very recently. I studied engineering in college and kind of still almost reject the title of artist, which I'm trying not to, because I'm trying to be really proud of my creativity and the fact that this film exists and that people have seen it. But yeah, the first couple weeks of school, I think I was, I went to film school kind of to, I guess, professionalize my curiosities as like a Trojan horse almost as a producer. But I just felt like it was at the forefront of my mind. And I know I was hesitant to share because it was very personal. I was really protective of my parents. I was coming against this stigma of writing autobiographical stories in school, which is strange because I think all of our stories come from some place in reality that we should acknowledge and show on screen. But yeah, I'm just really honored by the feedback and by how more specific I made the story, the more universal it ended up being. So it's just really an honor to be here and part of this program.
I think one of the things that really struck us when we saw Broken Bird originally is that, you know, there's so much being put on festivals nowadays, and really across cinema, and deservedly so, to be looking for representation in cinema. And I always find that it's really interesting to take a look at a story that sort of breaks down, not necessarily stereotypes, but maybe just like kind of presuppositions as to what you're about to witness. And I think that's the thing that really struck me about Broken Bird when we watched it the first time, was that it felt so personal, but it felt incredibly universal, that anyone could really identify with kind of what was going on here. And it did it in such a unique way. I mean, there's obviously, I'm sure there's tons of mixed race and African-American Jewish people, but this idea of having this family, the movie is this amazing look at a family dynamic, and it's kind of cloaked around a very simple, like, kind of premise of this is what she's going through, but really it's about these kind of amazing human connection. And we actually saw a couple of shorts this year that did that, and I would love that the idea that that's where cinema is going, and the ability to kind of say, hey, like, you know, everybody's story is different, but like at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're just trying to get through this. And yeah, I was just a big fan of it. Like, it really, like, walked out of the room like, oh, so good. Moira.
Yes. So I guess for me, Practice kind of came from this twofold influence. I definitely was interested in this sort of intersection between, you know, adolescents forging their identity, and that crossed with the emergence of shame or sexual shame that's sort of inflicted from society. And so that was definitely something that fueled the story's writing it. But also, unsurprisingly, I went to an all-girls school for many, many years. And so you could definitely say that that experience had a pretty strong influence on, you know, the story setting. And I feel like it not only felt like an accessible environment to me, something that I could write about and feel really familiar with, but also, you know, it did feel like there was a lot about that environment, especially sort of the somewhat rigid idea of what a model student can be. I felt like that there was a lot already there in that setting to really echo these larger themes of societal conventions about female sexuality and shame and adolescence. So yeah, that's kind of the two-pronged genesis.
Yeah, I think the film, one of the things the film does that's really successful is that it seems to sort of push against this idea that young girls expressing sexuality at a younger age is kind of a taboo subject. And I think that's just becomes a fact that, you know, so much of cinema is considered to be, you know, seen through the male gaze. So the idea to have these kind of two, you know, kind of like tween, you know, pre-adolescent girls have this kind of fairly innocent moment. It's being observed by other people, nefarious people, you know, in positions of power that are then essentially shaming them, is a really kind of unique, you know, approach to telling a sort of dystopian moral tale.
Right. Yeah, it's this idea of kind of hyper surveillance, but also a lot of things that are left unsaid or unspoken, you know, things, and definitely leads down this path that gets pretty intense.
Jacob, you got a movie that's shot here in Florida, which is we're always really excited when one comes in and kind of kicks our butts with how good it is. And
Thank you.
this one's funny as hell, and your lead is amazing. So please tell us about it.
Yeah, I guess the genesis started with, I had actually made a short the year prior with Emily, the lead, who plays Claire. And that short was only a scene, and we had shot in New York. And up until that point, the only things I had ever made were really in New York. And I wanted to push myself visually and geographically. And I wanted to make something with her again. And so we talked about making something a little larger in scope, but also just having location and place be an important character in the story as well. And I knew I had access to certain locations, and it kind of had grown from there. And knowing that I wanted to strike this balance of sad but weird, goofy comedy as well. And I kind of like this idea of this character wanting to get away from it all, and inevitably the one thing you don't want to deal with ends up getting brought to the surface. So,
one of the things that one of the things that Claire does that to me is really good, and this is going to be like this really weird moment where you submitted Martini Night, the previous short, to us, and it didn't get in, but it actually sat as one of the top alternates in the entire festival, pretty much all the way through to the end. And the thing about that movie is, and Claire, is that the scripting on these movies is so tight. Like, these are so well written, and their characters are like absolutely fully realized three-dimensional people. And sometimes that's very hard to get across in a short film, to kind of give people an entire lived-in backstory in 12 to 14 minutes. So I know we'll get into that more, but just I'm sure we'll want to talk a little bit about the writing process.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Betsy and Dara, so this is a slumber party short, And it's the third, I think, slumber party short that Florida Film Festival has had. It actually technically might be the fourth if we count Hey Girl, which is playing at midnight this year, Mary Dodderman's short. But I'm constantly blown away by the quality of the women that have gotten together to make these films. And again, you guys' story is just like, the screenplay is just killer. So yeah, I'm gonna toss this one to you guys.
Thank you. Betsy, do you want me to? I'll start.
No, back and forth. So, sorry we're doing this in front of all of you.
So sorry, this is so embarrassing to air our baggage in front of you.
Easier when we do it in person. Okay, Dara, you start.
Okay, I'll go. So we met in at UCB. We're comedy writers, and we have been exploring like very truthful comedies, which we did in our the first short film we did together, which was a comedy about a miscarriage. And we knew we wanted to do another like super heartfelt comedy that was just kind of built for short form. So we kind of wanted it to be one scene, and it wound up being around a dinner table, which is just kind of one of the most like intimate, dynamic places you can set a bunch of relationships. And it was fun to kind of play with how much the relationship dynamics can change within one dinner. And that's kind of where we found the humor and wrote the script.
Awesome. I know yours was one of the ones I want to talk about casting as well, because we've had Marianne Plunkett in several films at the festival, and J.O. Sanders is always amazing. The guy could literally read the phone book and be great at it. So we'll come back on that a little bit too. Michael's film is really interesting because your film features a cameo from a really good friend of ours, Ginger Gonzaga.
Oh yeah.
Who ironically emailed me and said, "Hey, my friend's submitting a movie." She emailed me the day after I watched it. And I said, I watched this movie like 12 hours ago, and it's freaking great. And she's like, I knew you'd like it. So I do want to talk a little bit about, The Priest.
I think it's the first thing I've directed, and I work mostly as a writer, and which means I write a lot of things that never get made. And it kind of came out of a place, like I've been able to be on a lot of different sets and learn, and it kind of was just at a point where like, okay, like I want to make something, I just want to write something and make it for myself, and try it and see, how I like directing, how it is, just kind of do it. And the genesis of the story, I think, started with a question, which is, when you drive outside, I live in Los Angeles, and you drive outside the city in 2-3 hours, you're just in the desert, kind of in all directions. And in the desert, it's just a really interesting place. There's all these really small towns, and they just collect all kinds of people, eccentric people looking for aliens, people escaping, survivalists, hippies. It's just kind of this great mix of people. And there's just this great weirdness to it. And in all of these small places, there's a church. And it kind of just, the question was, so what does it mean to be a priest or pastor in one of these churches that everyone sort of just drives by, and it's a little bit forgotten by time? So that's the genesis of it. And kind of the first image I had was a priest coming outside the church to kill himself and getting hit by a car, almost like God's not letting him even kill himself. Yeah. And that's where I began.
Awesome. Kat, Matthew, do you guys have anything you want to jump into? I kind of want to let these guys have at each other a little bit too.
Sure. No, my question mainly is about, is casting, because so many of these shorts have such incredible casts, and where people just seem to fit them like a glove. And obviously there's some of them have some bigger names, and I'm wondering, were those from able to get these people from previous relationships or friendships, or were they just sent blindly? Their management was sent a script and it was passed on and they said, yeah, we want to do this. People like Jay Sanders and Patton Oswalt, people like that. So
yeah, does anybody want to jump in on that? Yeah, Betsy.
Yeah. Jay and Marianne were in a play with a friend of ours in New York called Uncle Vanya. And I was talking with this friend saying, oh yeah, we need older actors who can do comedy. And she was like, well, I did a play with them and they're married in real life. And I was like, you think they would do it? And she's like, hell yeah, they're
Oh,
so
that's
nice. They're so cool. So we basically, like, we already had a deck and a treatment and the script and everything. And we wrote them an email asking if they'd be interested, if it was something like that they'd be into. And they were so sweet and they were really into it. And we tried to make things go as quick as possible so that we weren't wasting their time.
yeah.
Yeah. I guess well, everybody's got phenomenal cast. But while we're on the subject, I guess, of like fairly famous people, I guess we'll ask Michael how he got Patton Oswalt on his show.
Yeah, I feel like I tricked him a little bit. But I'd written the script and I was thinking about casting that, and I was thinking like, oh, it'd be so amazing to get a comedian for this role because it's actually like a pretty quiet role, and you want someone really emotive. And I thought maybe I can get maybe somewhat of a name of a comedian, like that would be amazing. And I was downtown Los Angeles with my friend, and we're at a parking lot, and I literally look over and there's Patton Oswalt just standing there, and he's a little bit lost in thought. And he just had I'm like, oh my God, he would be amazing. And I've been a fan of his for years, and I think he's such a great dramatic actor as well as comedian.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything to him. I just was like, okay, like he'll never do it in a million years. We have no money, like, but we'll just send the script to his manager. And that's what we did. And 2 weeks later, he wrote and he was like, I'm in. And then it was both like this moment of like, okay, it's amazing, and then also like, oh shit, we better like make this real and figure out what we're doing, because we have Patton Oswalt now. But yeah, it was totally a just blind submission.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's amazing, and
like
he
a
supports.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, and he supported so many like young and new directors and does shorts, and you know we offered him a little bit of money, and he was like, no, just give it to charity. Like, so he was incredible.
Man, I was waiting for your like Schwab's drugstore moment where you like walked up to Patton and like elevator pitched him like right there in the parking lot. Rachel and Moira, you both use younger actors in your film, and I know that because, like I said, we have a lot of film school students that are out there and they're doing general casting. And also typically not being 3,000 miles from LA gets a lot harder to get a really high level SAG actor to say like, yeah, I can totally get out of my bed for this 6 hours to this day and knock out a couple of scenes for you guys. But I do want to know a little bit about how you guys approach locating your casts.
I can start. So I feel like I got very lucky because I don't know that much about casting, and so I kind of did probably what a lot of people might suggest you don't do, which is I took to the internet and just put a post up on Backstage, and kind of expecting that to not work and for me to have to figure out how to actually, how other ways to go about it. But these two really lovely girls showed up, and they both seemed really fitting for the characters. They're both very talented, like extremely mature for their age. Sometimes I would forget I was talking to 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds. But they also had some like innate characteristics that really reminded me of the characters that I'd written, which I found to be like really helpful. I think that's probably true for all actors, but I think particularly if you're working with kids, unless you're very undaunted by that, which I was not, it kind of helps to start with character traits that you already see in the characters, in the actors.
Absolutely. And Rachel,
so good.
Your young lead she's amazing. She's just so, it's just so much of her performance that's internalized. It was really kind of impressed me so much.
Oh my gosh. I think my story is really similar to Moira's, actually, of like, you can probably still read our Backstage listing, and all of my random Instagram messages of like, don't be creeped out by me. But ultimately, the way we found Indigo was Spike Lee is a professor at our school and read the script, and he was like, have you seen my show? She's got to have it. And I was like, of course I have. And, you know, now I have. But we sat together and we watched some episodes that Indigo appeared in, and like, out of context, just I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what her character was, but just like her screen presence was so tangible. Like she could sing and dance and move. And a lot of that was without dialogue, that she was incredibly emotive without actually saying anything. But it wasn't until when we met in person that I knew this was the woman, because yeah, she's a woman. She made me want to kind of emulate her behavior. She picked out a restaurant where we were going to meet, and she was like, I always get the ceviche here. And I was like, okay, this woman is older than her years would say, and that's what we were looking for, with that mixture of I guess humility that I think comes from partly of being Black and Jewish, which she is, and not having her footing fully. So she was definitely, you know, braver and more curious than I was, but still had that kind of confused identity that I could relate to. So it was definitely luck. But I think we met with over 30 people that came in from backstage, and I think the film could have worked with many of those people. But yeah, I guess you do want to keep looking, because I didn't want to have to change the movie to fit the person necessarily. We wanted to adapt, sure, but she was just everything I imagined. It was really cool.
Did you have more of a trouble? Obviously, she sounds like she nailed it, so, and clearly she did. I guess I'm actually curious about casting the father character, if you had them test together, if you had to go through a couple of people, because they have a real inherent warmth that's, I mean, really, it feels very true.
They actually had never met before until shooting, and I remember being really anxious about that. And then I guess I justified it being like, well, her dad's not really in her life anyway. So, but I made sure the first scene that we did with them together was when she was getting picked up by him. So that kind of reticence of how much do I give you right now was real. And then when we moved into the restaurant, they started warming up, and like every time I would turn away, they would just be giggling, and she would be wearing his glasses and making fun of him, calling him old. And it was just like, they just hit it off. And I definitely feel like they're both part of my real family now.
That's amazing. Now, Jacob, you mentioned that you've worked with your lead before. I definitely am curious about the, you know, high school, you know, you know, well, people have seen the short, so, you know, it's not giving too much away. But yeah, pulling out together the kind of the rest, you know, little other extra pieces of the cast.
Yeah, I knew, I kind of wanted them to be vaguely familiar with each other in high school. He was almost more of an acquaintance.
Yeah.
And kind of, there was more of a mystery there where it's like, oh, I don't really know you that well.
Yeah.
I definitely don't know how you are now, but it doesn't seem like a lot has changed. And I don't know if that was like an amalgamation of, I don't know, growing up in Fort Myers and just a few different people I knew. I didn't know Matt, the actor who plays Cody, before the shoot. He was recommended to me by a friend who worked on a comedy show that Matt had been on. Yeah. I knew I wanted a comedian, and I wanted someone kind of likable, but I really I wanted him to play more of a grounded character than I'd seen in like the more absurd things that he'd done.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then Emily and him had only met, I think, they met the day before we started filming, but they just hit it off and had great chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it works really well. I mean, there is a moment in there where you sort of like, and I you know, I can say I'm at least partially like, you know, blamed for doing this. I imagine all of you are, is that, you know, you meet somebody who knows you and you just really can't remember if you've ever met this person before in your entire life. But theoretically, they're just totally like, how have you been? And you just fake it. You're just like, I'm calm, man. I'm so good. How have you been? And that's kind of definitely that dynamic that kind of exists at the very beginning of it. But it definitely, you know, it takes a turn to a direction that I think a lot of us weren't expecting when we watched it originally, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let you guys have at each other for a minute. You know, whatever you guys think of each other's shorts, or any questions you sort of have about the process on someone else's work. And you can free reign. Whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
I have a question.
Yeah. Good.
I'm curious about the tapes directors and writers. I mean, you said you're comedy writers, and that totally makes sense because I feel like comedy is always this really insightful mixture of how do you talk about painful things but accessible. So I'm wondering about your dynamic with each other and kind of how that worked out with tone. I'm so inspired by your dinner table scene. I love those scenes so much. Just kind of, I guess, how you went about the intricacies of what each character was bringing in that moment. I don't know. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Rachel. That's so nice. Me and Dara are like, we've been writing together for like 5 or 6 years. And when we communicate with our families, we both realize we're mostly like always having screaming dinner parties, and then like everything is okay 5 minutes later. And we really wanted to explore the relationship between mother and daughter. And we're like, we want to show a blow up moment and then show that it's okay moments after that. And that is normal to a lot of people. But I think we know all of the actors. They're all comedians too at the dinner table. So we wrote those parts for all of them.
Nice.
So we knew kind of like exactly what their personalities were, and that's really helpful. We mostly always write our parts for a specific actor. Just helps us in writing so much. So yeah, we're inspired by the actors like so much, and we try to piece together what this family looks like based on like their acting and comedy. And they're all such amazing comedians, but they're really great at just like regular acting and pulling off dramatic scenes too. Dara, what do you think?
Well, I was gonna jump on what Rachel said about like autobiography, and like not that this is about either of our families, but we pulled like all the dynamics from our family. And Jay and Marianne at first, the mom and the dad, were like, is this, I don't know if this is how people talk to their family at a dinner table. And we both were like, is this not how people interact? And then me and Betsy kind of linked up and we're like, this is how my family is. And Betsy's like, mine too. And we had to like check in and be like, it's okay if you have chaotic family dinner tables, like, you know, the truth about what happens. And like, just, it was kind of a reminder to be like confident in like what you know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I mean, I've been through a lot of experiences that kind of like cutting down, you know, on each other, you know, as you're sitting around and you get in a group, especially if you don't get together that often. So, you know, you get, you know, it's sort of your chance to unload a little bit, but, you know, in a lighthearted way that sometimes maybe pushes a button or two.
I have a question for Rachel and Moira too. Is how is it directing children? I know, Rachel, that young woman isn't as young as the girls in practice, but how was it directing them? I'm always babysitting and I feel like I can barely get my thought across to them. So I was so impressed by that. So what was that like?
They're wonderful.
Well,
Sorry, I was going to jump on that because both the performances are so wonderful, and I'm like, I have a hard enough time directing adults. Like, how did you do that?
I feel like the two main actresses in practice were really already very professional, but still, like they didn't. I don't know how trained they were in acting necessarily, but they definitely had a lot of experience being on sets and on the stage and stuff. And so I feel like they were both coming at it with a certain understanding of how a set is run and also like their own process of how to get into character. I mean, we did have a lot of, I would say a lot of our rehearsal time was spent really like talking about the characters, especially because you know, it kind of is a bit of a sensitive subject matter, so it felt like it required a bit of like delicacy when dealing with really investigating the characters and where they're at in life and their relationship with each other. But they, you know, they showed up with such a maturity that I felt like all of the cautionary tales that I was told didn't really seem to come into play. You know, I was very pleasantly surprised. I don't know if this is a very maybe an anecdote that's a testament to the maturity, but also the youth of the actors. Is the first scene that we actually shot. Caroline, the actress with the brown hair, had or Catherine, her character's name is Caroline. She, I guess, had too many donuts earlier the morning. So this is the literal first shot. She actually projectile vomited like everywhere. And at that point, I was kind of like, okay, great. I tried, and I'm ready to just put this behind us, never talk about it again. But she really rallied. Like, I wasn't expecting her to, but she came back with a real force and acted like nothing happened. So I feel like, you know, they definitely, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to be there. They had the chops, you know.
Wow. All right. Puke and rally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Rachel, did you want to say anything about it as well?
Man, I was kind of just daydreaming about film. I also went to an all-girls school, and I feel like I just didn't realize how I was seen until watching that film. And so just kind of still processing that. But about the question, yeah, I also cautionary tales. They say never work with kids, but yeah, maybe it's luck. But I do think something that I would apply to just any actor, something that I learned because I was kind of just learning as I went, is some of the lines just weren't working. Yeah. And I would overhear the actors just talking when they were getting snacks or talking to each other. And it made me figure out a way to just like, how would you say this non-verbally? Or like, let's do the whole scene without actually exchanging the lines. And a lot of that footage is actually what I included in the film instead, because it just felt like more emotion was there. So I think that was definitely a tip that I'm carrying henceforth.
I think it's a really important note. I see a lot of that, especially when we talk about film school students who turn in screenplays, is that, I always talk about this idea is like, how much of this do you really actually need to be saying with your mouth? Like, how much of this couldn't just be done by this cut or that look? Or, like, did you really always end every sentence you say in a complete thought? Like, there's always these little, like, kind of moments that, kind of take you away from a film. And if you're really looking to try to capture that bit of reality, it's always, the stuff that you never say that, means the most. I don't want to put Kat on the spot. Do you have any thoughts on anything, Kat? You want to jump in with questions for anybody?
Like, you asked most of the things that I wanted to know about, especially like casting children. That was a big one because I was so curious. And then also I wanted to know from Jacob about the karaoke song. And I just wanted to know if there was a story behind that or...
Yeah, I'd spent like probably way too long trying to find like a good 90s radio hit. Yeah. But one that was like, wasn't inherently emotional whatsoever. Like anything from Getting Jiggy With It to, I think like, what else was on the short list? Ace of Base, The Sign, just something kind of fun for her to, and then she has this kind of cathartic release during this silly song. That one turned out to be such a happy accident because it's kind of like the best lullaby as well, because it's got the Ooh Baby in it as well. But yeah, that's that's the genesis, I guess. It's just me going down like Spotify playlists of like, now that's what I call music or something.
I loved the last shot of your movie so much. It's just,
Okay.
it's perfect. Yeah, it's such a, beautiful moment.
The original idea was he was going to play acoustic guitar, and then Matt was like, I don't play guitar. So we had like, oh, it would be really funny if, because anytime anyone's like, can I play you something? You think they're going to bring out an instrument or something. And he brings out this karaoke machine. So it's like, oh, let's go with that. And like, karaoke is way better than just an acoustic guitar version of How Bizarre. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is like kind of a perfect moment, really, if you think about it, like, because you don't see that. Like, I think that's one of those things that's unique about the short, is that it subverts an expectation that you're about to have. Like, and I mean, so many great shorts really do this, and I mean, that's something else that, you know, like to talk about as well. Matthew's brought this up before in the past, and we've talked about the idea of, you know, creating a short film that has to live and die on its own. The short has to exist inside of its own world. It has to apply to the rules of kind of what short films can and can't get away with. You know, you can't have all these tangents that never resolve themselves inside of it. Otherwise, your short's just kind of meandering and unfocused. But they have to feel like they exist inside of a real world. And all of your films, to a degree, really do feel like they're one tiny little piece of everybody's kind of continuing story. And so I guess I want to know specifically, not necessarily if you have a feature version of, you know, extension of this short, but like how much you guys really thought about what happened before and potentially after your film took place. And any order you guys feel that you want to talk about that.
For Dara and I, we don't have a feature script written out for tapes, but we really take into account like everything about the characters in the world, and we outline forever just so we know about the characters. Like she's in school, what is she studying, where do they live, what neighborhood, what's the wine store like that they get wine from, just so like we can fully understand all of the characters when we write them out. What else?
Part of the fun of like being solo budget and doing these types of projects is like we do the costumes and the like set decorations partly. So like we really get to think about what the characters are wearing and why, and like make those types of decisions, which just like are utility, but also help you form the backstory a little bit.
And also their outfits are like whatever Goodwill had that day. No, it was a little more than that, but a piece.
That's fair. Anyone else? Moira?
So I guess for me, one kind of interesting, the sequencing of events is I actually thought of the last scene where Caroline attempts to push Sophie, her friend, over this banister of the staircase unsuccessfully. I thought of that kind of first, or towards the beginning of the writing process. I definitely, you know, I think there's a lot there of the awkwardness that an unsuccessful attempt to possibly, you know, murder your best friend, you know, what that entails. So I've definitely considered, you know, what happens beyond that moment, and you know, where the two characters really go from there, especially because they're so young and maybe don't have the tools to really properly express their emotions clearly. So yeah, and I think in terms of the backstory, like I said, a lot of the while it's not necessarily autobiographical, the story, I mean, the school that I went to did not make us wear body cameras, thankfully.
That's
but
good.
There's that's good point for them. But there definitely, when I was writing it, I was drawing a lot on you know, lived and observed experiences in that environment. So So yeah, I would say that there's a good amount of character building from my own, excavating my own memory and all that.
I didn't have a feature in mind. I kind of like the idea of this just snapshot of this weird weekend right before this woman's about to embark on a new journey of motherhood. And backstory, Emily and I had talked about, I would kind of worked on that together. Everything she's wearing, Emily had already owned. She had a bunch of loose, she wasn't pregnant. And it's neither of our lived experiences, but yeah, it was just kind of working with the actors and trying to create the backstory together and what she could draw from to help to better the performance. But it always took place to me in just this kind of weird 2-day weekend. There was no feature in mind or anything.
That was a really good fake pregnant stomach.
Yeah.
It was the second one I had ordered. The first one we ordered was it was not so good.
Yeah.
Like even when she's in the bathing suit, I love that shot. It's so real.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the technology.
Pregnancy is a recurring theme this year in sort of film competition
that,
shorts. I think there are 6 movies that have each a pregnant character, and in one of them, I am 99.9% sure she absolutely was 8 months pregnant when she shot this herself. She's the writer of the film. And the scene is pretty hard to believe that would be a fake stomach. So,
well, and also
later, and we're going to ask about that.
And in Josh Leonard's film, Fully Realized Humans,
yeah.
which is playing in the narrative feature competition, Jess Weixler is 8 months pregnant when they shot it. So,
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they scheduled her to shoot this entire movie basically as soon as she got pregnant. They were like, how can we make an entire movie where you're pregnant? And then wrote a movie.
So it is a continuing theme, no doubt about it.
I don't know what that's about. Maybe we're all going to get a lot of extra protection this year after this festival's over in case something's in the water. But well, I'd love to keep you guys on the phone for the entire rest of my life and talk about everybody's, like, everything that you're working on. But I guess I want to open it up one more time to everybody, just if there's anything you want to say, just kind of as we wrap everything up here. I can't thank you guys enough again for coming on and doing this and being able to get together in kind of the most bizarre moments of our lives, I'm sure, to celebrate making short films, which is quite an art form in and of itself. So I'll toss this one back out to you guys for one last round.
I had a question for Michael.
Yeah.
Which was, what was it like balancing the role of director with having like the celebrity of Patton Oswalt there? Like, were you like, I'm the authority? Like, what did you learn from the experience, and what did you have to tell yourself before it started?
It's interesting. Well, like, to give it some context, like, so it was the night before we were about to shoot, and I talked to Patton a little bit about the character and stuff, but we hadn't met yet. So there was a feeling of like, we hope he shows up. We hope he shows up. And he calls me the night before when I'm like dealing with everything else going wrong. And he's like, Mike, I don't want you to panic. So I, of course, panicked. And he's like, I am so sick. He had no voice. And basically he was like, look, I will be there. I'm getting shots. I'll give you everything I have, but anything you can do to like make my day easier, whatever. And so he did show up, and he was just like miserably sick. Like, it was awful. And he just, like, poor guy. But luckily the whole first day, he was just like seen in the hospital bed. So he just got to lie there, and he just like loved it. He's like, I'm method. This is great. So no, he was like, I think what I learned, actually, something I learned is we did a lot of quiet scenes with him, and it was like the first few days of directing were a lot of me being like, walk from here to here, drink your coffee, like, look sad, do this, it's like a lot of like not fun scenes for an actor. And I think he was like, I think he was starting to get fed up with it. It was just like, it's just not that fun. And then the last day he came in and he did his monologue, and he was just like so good and so excited to do it. And he's like, this is why I did it. It was like for this moment. So it just reminded me, like, as a director, I learned, like, yeah, it's like you have to find those moments that are actually fun for an actor and that they can really dig into and like kind of mix them up a little bit. So you're not just doing all silent, boring shot setups after another, but give them moments to really act. But otherwise, he was totally lovely and like wonderful, and yeah, it's just like we had Patton Oswalt and like drinking like cheap coffee and just sitting in like a chair in the middle of the desert, and he was happy.
That's awesome.
It's great.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys again so much for joining us here. To our audiences out there that have seen the films, don't forget to vote for your favorite for the Audience Award. If you haven't seen them already and somehow you decided that you were going to watch a Q&A for 45 minutes before watching any of these films, I don't know what's wrong with you, but that's not how it works. But they are still available on the virtual website on Eventive. And if you love something, tell your friends about it. Make sure they check it out as well. These are some incredible filmmakers that joined us here and made some really special movies this year. And again, thank you guys so much for coming out and joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Hey, we're gonna
Great talking to you.